The Quiet Hours. David Mercer, a 58-year-old widowed college professor, has spent the last 5 years in the quiet rhythm of his solitary life, grading papers, tending to his garden, and occasionally meeting his daughter for coffee. He has accepted the stillness, convinced that love was something that belonged to his past. Then, at a friend's book club, he meets Eleanor Hart, a sharp-witted, 62-year-old editor with a dry sense of humor and a love for jazz records. Eleanor carries her own scars, a divorce that left her wary of romance and a grown son who lives across the country. Despite her guarded nature, David finds himself drawn to her in a way he hasn't felt in decades. But Eleanor doesn't see him the same way. To her, David is a dear friend, a kindred spirit, nothing more. As their bond deepens over shared books, late-night conversations, and walks through the city, David wrestles with the quiet ache of loving someone who may never love him back. Set against a backdrop of autumn-lit streets, jazz bars, and the bittersweet beauty of middle age, The Quiet Hours is a poignant exploration of unrequited love, friendship, and the courage it takes to keep your heart open when the past tells you to close it. Chapter 1, The Book Club, the first time David Mercer saw Eleanor Hart. She was arguing with a man twice her size about the merits of postmodernism. "It's not clever," she said, waving a dog-eared copy of some unpronounceable French novel. "It's just annoying." Her silver hair was pulled into a messy knot, and her glasses, thick-rimmed, slightly crooked, slid down her nose as she spoke. David, who had been lingering near the wine table, found himself smiling. Their mutual friend, Margaret, intercepted him before he could escape into the safety of the kitchen. "David, you must meet Eleanor. She's the only person I know who hates Faulkner as much as you do." Eleanor turned, assessing him with sharp green eyes. "Ah, another sane person," she said. "Tell me, do you also think the sound and the fury is just a very long, very pretentious headache?" David laughed. "I've always called it Faulkner's revenge on English majors." Eleanor grinned, and something in David's chest, something long dormant, stirred. Chapter 2, Late Nights in Jazz. They fell into friendship easily. Eleanor lived just a few blocks from him, in an old brick walk-up with a fire escape she liked to sit on when she couldn't sleep. Sometimes, when David was grading papers late into the night, his phone would buzz. "You awake?" And he always was. One evening, he found her on that fire escape, wrapped in a fraying cardigan, a record playing something slow and melancholic inside. She handed him a glass of whiskey without a word. "Miles Davis," he guessed. "Close. Chet Baker." She took a sip, staring out at the city lights. "You ever listen to him after a heartbreak?" David thought his wife, gone 6 years now, once or twice. Eleanor nodded, as if that were answer enough. They sat in silence, shoulders nearly touching, and David wondered if she could hear his heartbeat. Chapter 3, The Line Between. It was at Margaret's birthday party that David realized he was in trouble. Eleanor had brought a date. Richard, a silver-haired architect with an easy laugh. David watched as Richard leaned in to say something that made Eleanor throw her head back, laughing in that unguarded way David had come to cherish. Margaret sidled up beside him. "You're staring." "Just thinking." "Thinking," she repeated, arching a brow. "Or regretting?" David didn't answer. Chapter 4, The Confession. He told her on a Tuesday. They were in his kitchen, drinking coffee, debating whether Casablanca was overrated. Eleanor, "Absolutely." David, "Blasphemy." When the word slipped out, "I think I'm in love with you." Eleanor went very still. Then, softly, "David." He already knew what she would say. He'd known for months. "I love you," she said carefully, "but not like that." The coffee between them grew cold. Chapter 5, The After. Life went on. They still met for book club, still argued about movies, still exchanged texts in the dead of night. But now, when Eleanor smiled at him, David let himself love her quietly, without expectation. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. "Would you like me to expand any section? Or adjust the tone/pace?" Asterisk, asterisk, this could easily unfold into a full, tender novel about the grace of unrequited love in midlife. Chapter 6, The Dinner Party. Weeks passed. The leaves turned, and the city exhaled into autumn. Eleanor hosted a dinner party, a small affair, just a few friends, Richard included. David arrived early, bearing wine and a dish he'd spent too long agonizing over. Asterisk, would she remember was her favorite? Would she care? Asterisk. Eleanor greeted him at the door, her fingers brushing his as she took the bottle. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said, but her eyes flickered with recognition at the label. She had remembered. Richard was charming in a way that made it impossible to dislike him. He spoke warmly of Eleanor's work, teased her gently about her terrible taste in music, Chet Baker excluded, and even asked David thoughtful questions about his teaching. It was unbearable. Later, as David helped clear plates, Eleanor cornered him in the kitchen. "You're quiet tonight." "Just tired," he lied. She studied him, then reached out, adjusting his collar in a gesture so intimate it stole his breath. "You're a terrible liar, Mercer." For a wild moment, he considered telling her again. Instead, he handed her a stack of dishes and stepped back. Chapter 7, the letter. David found it slipped under his door one rainy afternoon. A note in Eleanor's jagged script. Asterisk, meet me at the jazz club. 8 p.m., no excuses. Asterisk. He went, of course. She was waiting at their usual corner table. 2 drinks already poured. No Richard, just Eleanor, her face unreadable in the dim light. "I broke it off with him," she said without preamble. David's heart lurched. "Why?" She swirled her glass, avoiding his gaze. "Because it wasn't fair. To him. Or to me." A pause. "Or to you." The air between them thickened. A trumpet wailed from the stage, low and aching. Eleanor finally looked up. "I need you to understand something. What I feel for you, it's not nothing. But it's not that, and I don't know if it ever will be." David nodded, the weight of her honesty pressing against his ribs. "I know. Can you live with that?" The question hung there, fragile as a condensation on their glasses. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I already have been." Chapter 8, the fire escape. Winter came. They stopped pretending nothing had changed. Some nights, when the wind howled through the streets, Eleanor would climb the fire escape to his apartment instead of texting. She'd let herself into the window, shaking snow from her hair, and curl into his armchair like a stray cat claiming territory. One such night, David handed her a mug of tea and said, "Tell me about him." Eleanor blinked. "Richard?" "No, your ex-husband." She exhaled through her nose, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. "He was a good man, just not the right one." She met David's eyes. "Sound familiar?" David smiled, though it cost him. "I'm starting to think there's no such thing as the right one. Just people who stay and people who leave." Eleanor tilted her head. "And which am I?" "You," he said softly, "are the one who keeps coming back." Chapter 9, the birthday. On David's 60th birthday, Eleanor gave him a first edition of his favorite novel. It was absurdly expensive. He could tell by the way she refused to meet his eyes when she handed it over. "Eleanor." "Don't," she muttered. "I don't want to hear how you can't accept it." He traced the embossed spine, throat tight. "This is too much." "No," she said, finally looking at him. "It's exactly enough." Later, after the cake and the well-meaning guests had gone, she stayed behind to help clean. David watched as she scrubbed a wine stain from his tablecloth with military precision. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know." A silence. Then, without turning around, "Would you have loved me if things were different?" David stilled. "Yes." Eleanor's shoulders relaxed, as if she'd been bracing for a different answer. "Good." Chapter 10, the quiet hours. Years later, long after the book club had disbanded and Margaret had moved to Florida, long after Richard married someone else and David retired from teaching, he would still see her every Sunday. They'd take walks through the park, arguing amiably about nothing. Sometimes, when the weather was nice, she'd link her arm through his. It wasn't the love he'd imagined, but it was love all the same. And in the quiet hours, those moments between night and morning, when the world felt suspended, David would think, asterisk, this is enough. She is enough, Asterisk. Even if she wasn't, the heart, he'd learned, could hold both truths at once. Final note, asterisk. This ending leaves space for the reader to sit with the bittersweet reality of unrequited love. The way it lingers, the way it changes shape, the way it can still nourish even as it denies full fulfillment. If you prefer a different resolution, more closure, a time jump, or even an alternate path for David and Eleanor, I'm happy to adjust. Otherwise, this completes their story as a tender, melancholic ode to love in all its imperfect forms.